probably think Canada's government is fair and equitable. If someone were to say Canada's government has the potential to turn of that of an extremist society, like what we've seen in historically in fascist and communist societies, you'd probably say, well, she's cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs. Maybe that's the opinion you made yourself, the opinion you developed based on copious amounts of research. Or maybe that's the opinion they gave you based on the narrative you've been taught. Have you ever questioned how the Canadian government is organized, how officials are elected, how senators are appointed? As Canadian citizens, we don't question our governmenting nearly enough, which is a vital part of democracy. To keep our government in check, we must constantly question the way our government is functioning. We must scrutinize and question not only our representatives, but our governing system. Let's review how our federal government is set up. When electing at the federal level, people are voting for a party, not the PM. The Prime Minister is nominated by party members of the political party, which is a niche group of Canadians. How many working class people do you know that have the time and the education to join a political party? These people represent a very small portion of Canada's population, which limits the perspectives of representative parliament, as many of them share a privileged background. The Prime Minister's father was a Prime Minister before he was, so for him to go up talking about we, referring to him and the rest of Canada, isn't fitting because he doesn't know what it's like to be the rest of us. And essentially, we didn't even vote for him. We vote for the party, and he was chosen for us. Then we get deeper into the government, the Supreme Court and the Senate. The Senate helps review and pass legislation. This group is appointed by the Prime Minister. The Supreme Court members also are appointed by the Prime Minister. And finally, we have a representative of the monarch, the Governor General. The Governor General is appointed by the monarch. This is the foundation of our political system, and who did the general public vote for? None of it. This is problematic from the fact we can have majority governments. Trudeau even said himself on a podcast he wished he'd use his majority government for electoral reform. He knows the kind of power a majority government holds. Bills will just pass through the House as they hold over 50% of the seats. The bill goes to a Prime Minister selected Senate, then gets passed down the monarch appointed Governor General. If Canadian people have issues with this bill, they can bring it to the Supreme Court, whose members are also appointed by the Prime Minister. Well, it seems like there's a lot of check for legislation. There's not much input from the people. This is problematic because if everyone from the House and higher agree on a bill, it will pass, even if it's unconstitutional. That podcast is significant because it's an example of the Prime Minister understanding how much leeway a majority government truly has. There is minimal control in place to ensure that the changes are in the interests of the people. But why would you feel like you don't have a voice? Let's look at the 2024 Russian election. They were given the opportunity to vote, but literally none of them matter. Tons of votes were falsified, and the entire election was messed up. The same leaders were kept in power. They gave the illusion that they were giving a fair election, but nothing about it was fair. Crazily enough, I believe this to be comparable to our current government. None of who we elect changes the system at hand. We vote for a party. That party gives you a person. That person gives you an entire system of people you did not vote for. So is voting really enough to ensure bias doesn't accumulate and severely alter our governmenting? Do our votes even matter? Let me give you an example of something crazy. Say I really dislike tattooed people, and I make it my life mission to introduce a bill against them. I got nominated by the Conservative Party. The Conservative Party wins a majority government. Unfortunately, something happened to a majority of the Senate. They retired or died or something, and now I have to appoint more than half the Senate. And unfortunately, same with 5/9 of the Supreme Court. I appoint my tattoo hater friends and pass a law that states anyone who's tatted up can't get a job. The people take it to the Supreme Court, but they agree with me because I picked them. Now that sounds crazy. I know who would do that, but it happened in Quebec. Bill 21, brought into legislation in 2019, prohibits people of Quebec from wearing religious symbols to work if they work as public servants. So teachers, law enforcement, prosecutors, they can't wear religious symbols to work. And this obviously disproportionately affects those who wear hijabs, because if you have a cross, you could probably just tuck it in your t-shirt, or other religious symbols are more easily hidden. And this violates religious freedoms, equality rights, and the freedom of expression. So clearly our system can go against the Constitution and pass bills that way. Think about it logically. If you were to appoint your Senate and your Supreme Court, you are going to appoint those with similar perspectives to your own, which can limit views in our government and create bills like this, which don't represent the views of those affected by it. This whole system creates a breeding ground of bias. So figures like Danielle Smith can come into power and distract us. Danielle Smith pushes her useless agenda about trans people upon all of Alberta when issues like lack of funding for education and unemployment grow greater and greater daily. Using her favorite manipulation tactic, pathos, Danielle Smith appeals to the emotions of people, telling them what they want to hear. She attempts to appeal to the people, just like Hitler appealed to people in Germany post-war. She loves to scapegoat and distract us through bills regarding trans people, which is an important but a minor conversation when it comes to problems such as healthcare and funding for education. This is also very comparable to Hitler, as he took a struggling country and made it seem like he was a hero. He made promises to fix society and shifted the perspectives of citizens to blame Jewish people. What I'm trying to say is that these leaders do not care about you or your fellow Canadian. They work in their own self-interest. Like, do you really think Trudeau cares for any of the livelihoods of the immigrants he brings into Canada, or how it furthers the housing crisis? He does not care that these people were brought into Canada, likely from a struggling country, who were promised a better life, and they're not going to find it here. He doesn't care that they won't. People here are already struggling with housing prices, but by creating a greater need for houses, he's making the problem worse. But if he didn't care about changing the lives, why would he let those people in? Great question. If our boy Justin, in the flesh, is the one who lets them into our country, as soon as they gain Canadian citizenship, who do you think they're going to vote for? Finally, if Hitler was elected democratically, what's stopping someone with the same greed for power from being elected in our Canadian government? We can't just assume no one will manipulate the system. We must put controls in places to stop this much bias from spreading in our government. Even without the extremity of totalitarian government, the way the Canadian government is currently running, it does not represent its citizens, and that is something we must change.